Start screaming.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no
Vast
West.
right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, you lucky devils. You better bet your bippies he reads everything. This one's going to be so good. It'll record. It'll make it. It'll be fine. That's why I played the theme. I'm going to play the theme again so I can record it, okay?
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no
Vast
West.
right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, you lucky devils. You better bet your bippies he reads everything. This episode is so good, I'm going to record it. And by episode, I mean this special church, the church after. Welcome to the Stones Unturned podcast. The church before church and the church after church and the church between church. This is going to be great. What's going on? I want to explain something to you people. Not one of you has ever sent me one of these. You understand this, right? None of you have ever sent me a single one of these. All you have ever sent me is an electronic swab of information. Bleeps and blops. On, off, on, off. And what has happened is a bank account here has gone down by a very specific quantum of money. It's no. This is the money. It's no. You didn't even send me money. What you did was one number went tunk, or you could think about it as a set of points, which are limited to the penny in a bank account. You could call that a set of points. You could call it an atom of potential energy, money's potential energy. It went down, yours shrunk, clunk, by a specific quantum. $24.99, I believe, if you bought a book, or $9.99 if you bought a subscription. And God help you if you did. Then what happened was, my account, this didn't go, they didn't take it out a penny at a time. They could take out 150 grand in one lump. Okay? Tunk. It was here, then it was here. There was no in between. And in the time that matters, this was instantaneous, which is the day of the transaction. Time is not infinitely divisible at the bank. Time is measured in seconds. And they go tick, tick. And days, it is measured in business days. Not seconds, business days. So it happened that day, and that's as good as instantaneous. Think of it as the subatomic level. Then, literally electromagnetic impulses, but a specific quantum of them, some transmitted through visible light, some through electrical signals in wires and twisted pairs of wires, radio waves trapped, some in electrical wires, some in twisted pairs of between radio waves trapped between twisted pairs of wires, or radio waves trapped between coaxial filaments in a coax cable. Radio waves. And sometimes through fiber optic cables, you're talking about pulses of light. How would you like to have to count those all day? Accurately. And then my bank account, dunk, instantaneously increased its potential energy by that precise quantum to the penny. Technically, it's split into two of these photons. Two of these photons. But don't think of it that way. And this took time, the time that it takes for an electronic transaction. But as far as the subatomic time, according to bank time, this happened on the same day. Unless it went through one or more National Reserve banks, and that takes one business day per step. These never change. But a business day to an outside observer could be the gap between business days can be a day, 3 days, a week, forever. Time is relative. The money was taken out of your account before you finished clicking send. The money showed up in my account a couple days later. This has something to do with the laws of physics, the speed of light in a vacuum, the speed of money in an internet. But you didn't send me any of these. So what are these? If you sent me, these are, okay, so my point is, so these are the photons, right? Yes and no. No, because there is no such thing as a photon, and yes, because there is no such thing actually as a photon. This is a photon frozen in time, perhaps? Evaporating before your very eyes. This once greenback photon is retreating from you at the speed of light and is getting fainter and fainter and redder all the time. The second law of thermodynamics is obeyed. Absolutely. Debits equal credits. I can promise you that. When the debits don't equal the credits, we get a catastrophic implosion, which leads to fusion, which leads to catastrophic explosion, which leads to a pretty big bang, which leads to a collapse. It has happened before. This is the perfect example of a photon because it doesn't exist. There is nothing real about this. Hear that? That's your imagination. That is pure imagination. There is nothing real about this. This is a piece of toilet paper some kid crayoned all over. This is a dream. This is a fantasy. This is an equation on a blackboard. 1 equals 1. You take one of these to a Federal Reserve chartered bank, and they'll give you one of these. 1 for 1. Conservation of momentum. But you take this to, but it's relative. You take it to Starbucks, and this gets you a lot less coffee today than it did yesterday, because time is relative. But it still says 1 on it. That was my point. This is the brilliant point I had when I was trying to get everything going. How are you guys? My point is this. It still says 1. But between the time I started explaining this to you and now, it's less than 1. Its impact on the universe is less than 1, and it's less every second. Those are not business days. It's less every second. In the broader scheme of things, in the broad pool of atoms which change in quantum fashion, but the trends of which seem to occur in the form of continuous waves and whatnot, that can't be predicted first. Except we all know we're going to hell in a handbasket. This is exactly like a photon because, and I'm not going to belabor this point yet, the reason I laugh so loud and so hysterically at scientists is because of the redshift. There is no doubt distant galaxies and quasars and clusters and things are faint and red shifted. They show the exact same pattern of light and dark lines that show that they're made of hydrogen and helium and fusion is going on and all of those things. But all of that is shifted far to the red end of the spectrum. And as I explained to you, there are a couple of ways of looking at this. This is not why, this is what. This is another thing. Newton's first law of physics is there's a difference between what and why. Yes, they have all these gorgeous equations that describe beautifully what seems to be happening. They mistake that for why. Here's what happens in some ways. We have these equations that describe waves, and it describes light. So what we're seeing is light that left in this color, but by the time it gets to us, it's this color. It's been stretched out. The wavelength's been stretched out. The wire hasn't been stretched, but it has gotten thinner because it's faint. Now, one way to describe this is because every star is giving off, this three-dimensional fountain of photons that aren't real. But there's a central reserve bank that is spraying out an almost infinite number of these every second of every day. It would blind you if you looked at it. If you if you went to Washington, D.C., and you saw the stream of photons that were coming out of the Federal Reserve Bank and the United States Treasury today, you would be blinded, and your face would be burned off. If you stood in front of, they print these in photons have the number 10 million on it. And they're printing those so fast the machine keeps breaking, the bearings keep catching on fire. They have to print them. The debits must equal the credits. They can't just write down a number. They can't just hack into the bank and just type in a number that the Treasury issued so many hundreds of trillions of dollars of bills. They can't do that. They have to print them. They have to exist. Because if the bank examiner comes in and the debits don't equal the credits, okay, so this is a photon. But according to the laws of photons, they can't go from 1 to 0.99, 0.98, 0.97, 0.96. And I'll tell you what you do with this. You walk into Walmart or Starbucks or the gas station or the tax man and you explain that to them, and they'll tell you that the problem, and what they'll come back with you is, oh, you're a quantum physicist. Great. How do you explain the redshift? How can a photon change its energy level? There is not an infinite number of possible photons. You understand this. They are discrete. Combinations of photons come off, depending on how many different kinds of atoms and what the temperatures are of those atoms at the time that they release a photon. That doesn't exist. What really happens is, you did not send me any of these. No. You might have put some of these in your bank account, but that's not what you sent me. What you sent me was the information about The size of your bank account getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the size of my bank account getting bigger and bigger and bigger within a space that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger faster than my bank account is getting bigger. We'll come back to that. A black hole, or, the beginning of the Big Bang or whatever, is redshifted. But according to quantum physics, that is not possible. There is no mechanism for a photon to be redshifted. That's not how that works. It looks, what you're seeing is, you haven't filtered out different colored waves. What you're seeing is, you're seeing a distribution of photons. Some are red, some are blue, some are green. And they're striking your eye in certain concentrations. But the further and further we get away from that star, that quasar, the more they get spread out, you see. The further and further you get from Washington, D.C., the fewer and fewer of these are going to hit your hand. They're going to hit you in the face. There's no way you're going to go blind looking at what you're getting from the government. What you're getting individually from the government, 10 billion, quadrillion light years away from Washington, D.C., you'll never go blind from that. You may starve to death, but you won't go blind. But if you could see all of the dollars coming out of the Federal Reserve Bank at once, you would be blinded and your face would be burned off. What does this have to do with Jesus? Before Jesus, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is money. I know what you're thinking. You think this is money. This was invented by the king of the Lydians, which is not on this map. Lydia is most of Turkey that runs all the way to the Pontus. The Pontus? The Hellespont. Not the Hellespont. The Pontus? Between Constantinopolis, Byzantium, and the East, right? The original Berlin, Byzantium, whichever side it's on. That is Lydia. And in 750 BC, they had a mine, Croesus, from 580 BC till about 550 BC. He invents this. He invents what you call money. The idea in your pretty little heads is that this is money. This is silver. This is sterling silver. This is high quality silver, but it has been stamped with a government mint markings to guarantee its purity. So this is specie. This is bullion, which has been in a very specific amount, which has then been stamped. The coin is actually struck with markings guaranteeing its purity. So this is specie. This is currency. This is currency. You hold this in your hand and you exchange it for goods and services physically. They're both currency, but neither one of them is money. Money is the information that is contained in the photon about the amount of energy that was given up by your bank account. It's the amount of energy. It's just a computer file. It's just information. It's a drumbeat that indicates the exact number of quanta of energy that was given up by your bank account, so that information can then be recorded in the atom of my bank account. Are you with me? So the photon represents the information. It does not represent any physical thing that is flying through the universe. It doesn't have to. It's just a mathematical model. And it will drives them crazy when you ask them, you get to talking about the redshift. Well, how does a photon know how much energy to lose? How does a photon lose energy? They're supposed to be discrete. They can't. You can't turn down the brightness on a photon. It's either on or off. Either you have a photon of blue light or you don't. But it's not an actual thing. It's just a cartoon representation of a chunk of information. How many bits does it take to record that information? That's the kind of thing I like to talk about. Currency, not money. Money is information. You see the thing on the right. Okay, well, let me back up. When Jesus is talking about a farthing, The woman who put the 2 farthings in the poor box and said she gave all she had. What he's talking about, I and some other coin experts believe, is this. This is a Roman farthing. This is a quarter of a Roman bronze penny. As far as we can tell. From somewhere very roughly around the time of, well, whatever time Jesus actually lived, if he lived, how many Jesuses there are. Anywhere from 1700 to 2200 years ago. This is a Roman farthing. With this, you could buy a piece of bread, a piece of cheese, and maybe a cup of beer. This is a Roman penny, but this is a very late Roman penny. This is made of bronze. This is 2,000-year-old bronze. This, as it's been attacked by the earth, it's been handled by people. Okay, this is a Roman penny from much later, but it's the same weight. It's high-quality bronze. You see how long it lasted. With this, you could buy a loaf of bread, a fish, a dribble of olive oil, and a vegetable, piece of fruit. And someone obviously has. And maybe a glass of wine or a cup of beer. A bowl of wine or a bowl of beer. Okay? This is useful material. It's called bronze. And the Romans really invent hard currency. The king of Lydia invented these coins. These are just droplets of gold of a certain weight and stamped with a stamp to certify their purity. This is actually electrum. This is not gold. This is a naturally occurring amalgam of gold and silver that would happen to be found in his kingdom. Up until this point, trade was done even on the large scale between kingdoms was done by barter. Okay? Thank you, Sticky Marks. Mwah. Thank you for the photons. Appreciate those. He comes up with a handy portable form of barter. There's an intermediary form of barter. You trade me so many tons of wheat for so many ounces of that stuff. But it's got to be the good stuff, because the last time you tried to pay me with this stuff, and then I take it to the freaking Persians, and he's got some smart, he's got rubs it on a rock and says it ain't no good. Well, this has the mark of the king on it. Guarantees purity. By the way, do you know how to purify gold out of electrum? Like, this is electrum. You can very easily purify this into gold. Do you know how you do that? Speaking of purity and speaking of, what you call it? Alchemy? What you have over here is about 2,000 years older. This over here, okay, so gold. Gold is a very useful material. It's still very useful to this day. It does not corrode. It's the best conductor of electricity that we know of, right? At room temperature, of all the metals, gold conducts electricity the best. It doesn't corrode. It's very useful. It's very pretty. Has a high value, but a low supply. But it's also extremely durable. It's also very malleable. You can make, it's almost like plastic, really. Silver corrodes very easily. However, has a lot of, it's pretty like gold. It's like gold's, it's the other gold. It's the Bitcoin of gold. Silver is the Bitcoin of gold. You can make mirrors out of silver. You can make a mirror out of gold, but then you don't get the full color. You can make mirrors out of silver. You can see yourself in silver. Bronze, very useful material. Very useful material. Underrated material. The Romans standardize gold, silver, bronze coins. The Romans have a funny idea. It's not about one god emperor owning everything and we're all his slaves. It's about 12 corporations of staffed by educated people, born and bred and trained for this. And they follow certain laws of economics. They follow certain rules of good government. What the Romans invent is government. So this farthing, this Roman farthing, this is not only, and the Romans they invest in technology, they invest in metallurgy, they invest in numismatics. The Romans start scientifically appraising coins from all over the world. Not just to make money, they do scientific research into it. Coincidentally enough, they have a lot of these, what you call them, Jews, move into Rome at the same time. So by the time Julius Caesar comes along, Roman money has a reputation for being the highest quality, because these are useful materials. So they have a pretty consistent value by weight. So if we just know we have the purity right. So this is backed by Roman scientific numismatics. The Roman mint. But this is also backed by the full faith and credit of the Senate and people of Rome. This is not King, we're not supposed to be, King Kuros's gold. This is backed by an institution that is not subject to the whims of an individual. And when he's given dictatorial powers, there's a very strict time limit and all this other. And this is only during war emergency. Usually when the city's under siege, we elect a dictator. This is backed by the full faith and credit of the Senate and people of Rome. And it starts to matter. Rome keeps its word, more or less. Rome keeps its word. It doesn't matter, even during their worst periods, in terms of international relations, Rome kept its word to its neighbors, even to its enemies. It tended to keep its word. When Rome said something, you could trust it. You didn't have to worry that the next king is going to throw all that out and set up a whole bunch of new covenants. I'm pretty sure it's the Romans who put their foot down after they conquer the Middle East and say, this is the last and everlasting covenant. There'll be no more new covenant. And this is how the Roman Empire worked. The Romans respected their own law. They invent government. It's a job, not a person. It's a bureaucracy. It's a deep state. But that's, what do the Romans bring? The Romans bring government, law and order, peace. Right? They crucify robbers and pirates. They don't slap their wrists and tell them, don't do it again, please. They crucify them. You can worship any god you want. Please ask him to put in a good word for Zeus, and we'll leave you alone. Just mouth the words if necessary. What the Phoenician, okay, so this is hard currency. The Romans invent hard currency. It's not just because of the quality of the materials and craftsmanship and consistency of the weight. It is also because it is backed by the full faith and credit of the Senate and people of Rome. This is backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the people and Senate of the United States of America. No, the Federal Reserve Bank there's no shareholders. But it is backed by assets. Those toxic mortgages that are worth less than this, these are some of the assets. These are some of the collateral that back this promissory note. We'll get into that some other time. This was invented by the Phoenicians. Before there was ever hard currency, they invented money. This is not currency, this is money. This is currency. You can exchange this for almost anything with almost anybody, especially a dollar. It's, ladies and gentlemen, you're living in the Basileia Dollaru. You're living in the kingdom of the dollar. Maybe in Germany it's not quite as impressive, but the rest of the world will take dollars. That's good. It's good for us. As Trump has said, and as he has said, very, very quickly, we're going to stop being the global reserve currency, and you don't want that. But I'm not backing Trump. I'm saying that's one particular point of fiscal policy on which I think we can find common ground. What about the farthings of Jesus? This is hard currency. And, and there's that parallel story Is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar? Do you have a penny? He's really talking about this. All I have is, but this is a little bit later. Do you have a penny? Well, whose face is that? Whose image? Whose eidolon is on there? Caesar's? Well, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. You want to do business with Caesar? You want to be in bed with Caesar? You're in bed with Caesar. What do you want me to tell you? Give him back all of his denarii. Keep the shekels here. Right, there's two ways of reading that story. Because it's a controversy we know really did happen about taking money out of the temple treasury and giving it to the Romans to help pay for the aqueduct and other improvements around the place that the Jews never asked for. Have you ever been to a neighborhood barbecue where you get this free plate of food, and when you're done, the host comes around, collects the money like you're in a restaurant? Have you ever been to one of those? Do you live anywhere south of Interstate 70? Have you ever been to one of those kind of neighborhood barbecues? This is what happens to the Jews of the real kingdom of Judah and in and around Jerusalem. They get all of these improvements, infrastructure improvements, that they never asked for, and now they are being dunned for. Which reminds me, remember I was talking about the argument Jesus was having with the lawyers about the case. Jesus scolds them for a case about the korban and the parents, honoring the parents. This comes down to rabbis, judges saying, you must pay the tithe tax. That's a tax in Judaism, and it's a tax in Jewish communities. Korban is a tax. It is a debt you owe God through the temple. And Jesus is criticizing them for saying, you say paying the korban tax, the tithe tax of the temple, where the money changers are that he throws out. You're saying that's more important. They can't afford food for their elderly parents. They can't afford medicine and health care for their elderly veteran father. Because you, the local judges, are saying, and publicans are saying, well, you have to pay the tax first. That's what that case was about. And he's saying this violates the 10 the 10 laws of Moses trump the 513 laws of Leviticus and Numbers and the parts of the Talmud, right? The old parts of the Talmud. He's saying that trumps all that, to coin a phrase. Well, what's that got to do with Roman money? He talks about money a lot because this is a bourgeois religion invented by the bourgeoisie for the bourgeoisie. These people, this is their religion. And they invent this. I think it's funny that Abraham comes from here. He supposedly comes from Ur. This tablet's from Uruk, but it's the area of Ur and Sumer and Akkad, right? The second oldest civilization. It looks like it probably starts on the Indus, but we know that these people here, and one of these people apparently moves west. You know he's a pimp, right? He pimps out Sarah for the first 50 years they're living with, and his daughters and granddaughters. He's pimping them out. You know that, right? In real life, he's probably pimping them to the Nabateans. You understand this, right? But he's pimping them to the Bedouins or whoever. And God teaches him lessons, and he meets people who teach him lessons, and he gets to know God through this process, and he finally becomes Abraham, and the angel tells him and his wife, now you'll have children of your own, sons of your own, who become fathers of mighty nations. Ha, ha, ha. Well, the people who invent this stuff, well, that's where they come from. But here's the problem. For whatever reason, people believe this is currency with some value. They believe this is currency with some value. Let me show you something. Can you see that? That is a kopeck. This is a Soviet kopeck from the 1950s, 60s. I've got another one from 70. This in 1950, the best neutral economic experts figured that the ruble, 10 rubles to the dollar. A ruble was a dime. A kopeck is a Soviet penny, is Russian penny. It's 1/100th of a ruble. This is in 1950 when this was minted out of cheap brass. Actually, this is pretty good quality brass. This thing looks brand new because nobody ever used it. They were worthless. This is brass. This is because toilet paper is too expensive. This is worth, in 1950, this was worth 1/1000th of a dollar. Today, this is worth approximately $4. This is a farthing. This is 1/4 of a penny. This is a British penny. Nope, tell a lie. This is an English penny from 1722. This is a U.S. penny made of bronze from 1831. This one's 300 years old. They are the exact same thickness. They are the exact same diameter. They are the exact same weight. Bronze penny, 300 years apart. Two related but independent sovereign nations. This is a quarter of this. A farthing, the exchange rate is 1 farthing is 1/4 of a penny. The old lady put in 2 farthings, put in a half penny. Half penny. Are you with me? This little cope, I lost it. Where did it go? There it is. This is made of bronze. This is made of very cheap brass. And by brass, I mean mostly zinc. Okay. This, in 1950, was worth 1/10 of this. Today, it's worth 4 of these. This is a farthing. This is 1/4 of 1/1000th of a dollar. Are you with me? I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news. This is not worth blowing your nose on. This is currency. This is not money. This invention over here is the original money. This is an accounting of an atom, an atomic bank, of its value. It's a certain number of jugs of olive oil. It is a certain number of sheafs of grain. Let's call them bushels. A certain number of jugs of olive oil, a certain number of bushels of wheat. Let's call it barley, because you can make beer out of wheat. So much olive oil, so much wheat. This is what a local landlord deposited in the king's community chest. You owed a certain amount of your crop would go to the king of the city-state, the concentration camp. You owed that. And when you deposited it, when you hauled it to the collection place, no market, it was hauled to the collection place. You received this, a receipt on clay for what you had contributed. I forgot to look this up. Which book of the Bible is it? Is it Exodus? It's how much each clan gave. It's written on their tent flaps. How much each house gave to the tabernacle. Everybody contributed like so many goats, so many sheaves of wheat. Which book of the Bible is that? Exodus. We think this might have actually be based on some old documents, that they would be, each patriarch of each clan would give so much, and it was written on their tent flaps by the collector. And your status, you couldn't read or write, but people learned to read those numbers and what they meant. So the more you gave, the more you must have had, and this was how they began to indicate status, by how much they give to the temple, how much they give to the tabernacle, whatever. This gets written on the tent flaps. And there's one particular season where this happens, right? Everyone contributed to the building of the tabernacle. This is in Exodus. Yeah, and it's this catalog of how much each clan gave. Okay? Well, thanks, Medley. That's what this is. What each landlord gives to the overlord, the king, Marduk, or whoever. That's what this is. There's a problem. I owe the government 500 bushels of wheat and 10 barrels of olive oil. I got 5,000 bushels of wheat and I got no olive oil. And there's a guy in another part of the empire who's sitting on 500 barrels of olive oil, but he owes the king 100 bushels of wheat. They work out an exchange. How much? Okay, a barrel of olive oil is worth how many bushels of wheat or barley? I don't know why I keep... What they can do is, here's the thing, when they turn in, when the bagman comes around, he doesn't collect the physical commodity. What he collects is the receipt you got. When the taxman comes around, he's not collecting the physical tax you owe, the barrels and the bushels or whatever. He's collecting these. So these landlords start trading these among themselves. They like trading cards. I need this, I need that. This is exactly what the Soviet Union did. It was a barter system. But this is not barter. This is exchanging tokens. And these tokens are what's on deposit. These are what you've deposited in the communal banks around the area or in the city. Yeah, here's another one. Here's another one. I got $8. I got $8, maybe $9 by now. One quarter of 1/1000th of a $1950. I'm not making any of this up. This is money. These are numbers that can be exchanged to some kind of ethic. This is barter. This isn't money. This is just currency. This is money. This is money. I think it's a very strange coincidence that the people who invented this move west, invent this, then invent this. It's the same people. You ever tried making one of these? This is the most exquisite toilet paper ever crafted by man. Look whose picture we put on it. George. By the way, this is George. This is George. This is Charles. That's from Brunswick. Here's a penny from the 1600s. People just kept using it as a penny. So what is Jesus' fiscal policy? Half of his disciples are publicans. These are tax accountants. Like the father of Adam Hansa. He's a tax accountant in GE Capital. Senior vice president. Was promoted right before the incident. One could call him a publican or from the publican class. He's trying to hide these GE's clay tablets from the publican. That's what his job is. That's exactly what his job is. Well, set a thief to catch a thief, right? When FDR created the Securities and Exchange Commission, who was the first director? Who was the first head of the Securities and Exchange Commission? The Prince of Thieves, Joe Kennedy Sr. Set a thief to catch a thief. Render unto Caesar, what is Caesar's? Well, what is Caesar's? This sounds like something. But render unto God what is God's. This sounds exactly like something Antigonus Matthias said. This was his rebellion against Rome. He refused to pay the tribute out of the temple tax. The Herodian kings, I beg your pardon, the Hasmonean kings put up by the Maccabees, they had tolerated some Roman commerce, at least outside of Jerusalem. And they did not object, apparently, to paying taxes on that commerce. You're going to do business with the Romans using Roman money, you're going to owe Roman taxes. But the taxes people had paid into the temple in Jerusalem, that the Herodians through Herod, the Herod had paid for, they don't want any of that money going to pay for this stuff. And to the Romans, I think it meant going to Herod, who has to deal with the Romans. So when Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's, most historians think, because this debate took place, and this was a bone of contention. Later on, is it in Luke, Jesus makes reference to a riot that happened in a certain town, one of the points along the way where they're building this aqueduct to bring fresh water to Jerusalem. And people tear it down because the Romans have taken money, the Herodians have taken money from the temple tax fund and given it to the Romans to pay for this. Sounds perfectly reasonable to you and I. But this is one of the lines. And once again, what happens? He gets crucified at Antioch. We know that happened. Crucified. He was betrayed by the No, this is how the Herodians become king. He's the last Hasmonean king. But he says no more paying tribute to Rome no more paying tribute to Rome. So he rules for 3 years. Then he is betrayed by Herod, but Herod the Great. He's betrayed by, he's great now. The Romans say that was great, Herod. Have Jerusalem. But he sets up some kind of compromise. He marries a Pharisee wife. He sets up a council. Instead of giving all power in the temple to one faction or the other, there's a council of 71 plus the high priest. 72, the Sanhedrin. And everybody has a say. They have some say. They still keep the inner temple, the original old temple, the one built by the Persians for them. They keep that, Jews only, but the outer courtyard, you've got more commerce going on to pay for this tourist attraction that he built for their own benefit, but why would they see it that way? Why would a fanatic see it that way? But this is what the efforts he's trying to make. But this is where Antigonus Matthias puts his foot down. No more tribute to Rome. Well, the Romans crucify him. So after Herod hands him over, now they install high priests. They say, You guys can run Jerusalem. He didn't set foot in Jerusalem, I don't think. And I will be Basileus. I will answer to Rome. And this lasted for 100 years. This lasts for 100 years. But then something happens. We don't know exactly what happened. Well, the Caesar party takes over. This is all part of the Caesars taking over. Caesar Incorporated. It's funny, he works for them until he succeeds, and now his name goes on the corporation. It's Caesar Incorporated. See, they're breaking with the past. He was from the Julian clan, but had no money. He goes to work for this rising merchant class, which includes a lot of Jewish people and their friends. Yes, Sticky Marks, I got my beer. Hi, Channel. According to Chateaubriand, the atom was conceived by Marcius, a Carthaginian. Oh, wow, that's very interesting, Channel. I will check that out. Yeah. Are the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, like these words, like it's kind of hard to know what to call them. The ones who keep popping up. Yeah, that is fascinating. Oh, Medley, you'll have to watch it later. 0 drop frames, we're doing good. What has this got to do with this part of the world? Never mind. What's this got to do with this? I had a point. What was it? Well, for one thing, Roman money starts becoming the universal money here. Long before the Roman army starts taking control of various fortress towns, Roman money, the Basileia denarii, is taking root all through this area. That was my point. And Jesus seems to be throwing it back in their faces. That's one way of interpreting this story. He gets crucified. Well, he starts talking crazy. Then it's when he chases the bankers out of the temple. The next day he's crucified, right? Like that. This happens really fast, right? He chases them out of the temple. They go celebrate the Passover. He's arrested later that night and crucified the next morning, right? You've seen these headlines. I have a slideshow somewhere. All through the 20th century. Notorious crime lord and bank robber executed Tuesday morning. Crime boss, underworld boss, and bank bandit executed, right? That was the... Oh, he was terrible. He committed crimes. He ran the city for years. Then one day he robbed a bank and, we had to do something about that. The paper is plastic in the UK now. That's interesting. Well, it's just... But the problem with this is you can't change the numbers on it, and neither can the government. If the government could change this to put a 0 on there, put 2 zeros on there, imagine what they could do then. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads everything.
Ooh, that's going to take a minute.